Exactly. Maybe we should turn here. Sorry. Kimber's still babysitting and she's over on Amherst. When we pulled up, Kimber was out in the front yard with two young boys who were playing in the driveway. She was holding a sleeping baby and waving to us. We parked in the driveway and she introduced us to the two older boys. They gave us shy hellos and then ran off to continue their game. Once they left, we had explained everything that had happened to Kimber while she listened and rocked the baby in her arms. Sam is right, that doesn't make sense. But why are we even concerned about something that happened decades ago? Whitney, Kyle said so I didn't have to. A flash of surprise crossed Kimber's face, and she walked over to put the baby down in his playpen. Then she walked back and pulled me into one of her famous super comforting, not at all awkward hugs. When she released me, she began to pace around the driveway. Okay, so we think Whitney somehow got involved in all of this, and you're right. If we want to figure this out, we'll need to start at the beginning. Phil is right. Every mystery in this town is one piece of a larger puzzle. It's all related. She stopped and looked over at us. We need to get to the source if we want answers. Yeah, that's not a bad idea, Kyle agreed. I know he likes to hang out in the hideaway and get drunk with ex-Sheriff Clary. No, Kyle, not Jimmy, his dad. Tom? He's so crazy they put him in a home. He's the horse's mouth, though, isn't he? Jimmy isn't likely to know half as much as his dad, but as Kyle and Kimber argued, I watched the kids chase each other around the tree in their front yard. There seemed to be something carved in the bark, words, not unlike the triple tree at Ambercott Fort. I was too far away to read what it said. He got you, I heard the youngest one call to his brother. The skin men got you, now you have to die. Nuh-uh, Peter, I was touching the tree. No, you weren't, you're a liar. One of them got you, and now you have to go meet the shiny gentleman. No, I don't. Kimber, Josh is cheating. I shuddered and turned away from them. Where's the nut house? I interrupted them. Is it close? It's not a nut house. It's more like a hospice, Kimber chided. The rumor I've heard is that he's at Golden Elm and that it's in Cape Girardeau. That's about 40 minutes away, Kyle said and pulled out his phone. I'll check the visiting hours for Tuesdays. Sam, do you work tomorrow? I work every day, but I'll get out of it, I promised. Okay, cool. Let's plan to leave after school. The following day dragged on like any last Tuesday of the school year. Most people talked about what they did with their ditch day or complained about a cop showing up at their house to issue them a ticket while sliding less than pleased looks at me. When the final bell rang at 3:30, I grabbed my bag and booked it out to my car. Kyle and Kimber were already waiting for me. The drive took longer than we expected when I got lost in Cape Girardeau. The town was bigger than Drisking, and the streets weren't laid out with any sort of planning or logic. By the time we arrived at Golden Elm, we only had 20 minutes left for visiting hours. We're here to see Mr. Thomas Prescott, Kimber told the nurse at the front desk. We let her do the talking since she had a disarming, old-fashioned charm about her that put people in a friendly mood. Old Tom? Wow, he hasn't had a visitor since Christmas, when his son came up. Sign the check-in sheet and take a visitor sticker. Your family, then? Do you know where his room is? The nurse arched a thin, suspicious eyebrow. I'm sorry, we don't, Kimber apologized. My mother has been asking me to check in on my great-uncle while she's away doing Doctors Without Borders. I should have gotten more information from her, but you know, she only has so many minutes to call home. Oh, of course, dear. Let me get someone to escort you. An orderly led us to Tom Prescott's room, which we found empty. He pointed down the hall and said, he likes to read in the sunroom. We walked down the hall and found an old, thin man sitting alone and whispering to himself. He was sitting at the table in front of a backgammon board, moving chess pieces around it. Tom Prescott? Kimber said, smiling. He didn't look up, and I wondered if he had heard her at all. Kimber took a deep breath to try again, but the old man suddenly slammed his fist on the table. I'm him, goddammit. I'm Mr. Thomas Prescott. Don't call me Tom. People's kids used to have more respect. I'm sorry, sir, Kimber said gently as she sat down in the chair opposite from him. You kids have no respect. Do you even know who I am? It's my son that's done it. That boy's mama should have whipped him, but she was so soft, and now he's running around my town spreading his vulgarity and disrespect. Our apologies, Mr. Prescott. We never meant to be disrespectful. We greatly admire you. You're the man who built our town into what it is today. Everyone remembers that. Drisking was suffering, and the town was dying, and then you fixed it. We know that. I did what I had to do, the old man grumbled. It was my town. It still is. Who are you, little girl, to come in here and suggest otherwise? Ah, no, that's not what I said, Kimber changed tactics. And as for who we are, we're Mira McCaskey's kids. Do you remember the McCaskeys? Huh. So you're Ada's granddaughter? That explains why you're not there. We exchanged puzzled looks. We're right here, Mr. Prescott, Kimber said. You know what I meant, young lady. They all know. They know I rescued the town. That's my town. Of course they were going to let me do anything I wanted as long as the money kept coming in. That's why it's my town. Is the money still coming in? Kimber tested. Well, you're here, aren't you? They didn't like it, but they took the money. They didn't know. Not everything, they didn't. But they suspected some. And they must have been okay with it because they kept electing Clary and they kept taking the money. Prescott picked up a pawn and ran his fingers over it as he talked. It's just a powder, you know, so unassuming. A fine, soft powder. The powder doesn't know what it is. It doesn't know it's bad. It's the people who say it's bad. But it needed to be done. You know that, Ada. You know we had to do it. Kimber hooked him in. I know we had to do it, but it's your son. I don't think he's doing it right. Well, of course he isn't. The elderly Prescott slammed his fist on the table again and 2 rooks tumbled to the floor. They were mine. He took them from me. He thought he could do it better, but he took mine and he ruined my legacy. Decades of work and now it's all run by the powder. It's the dust of the crumbled empire. What about the skinned men? I asked, caught up in the moment. What are you talking about, boy? He growled. And the treehouse, the triple tree, what is it? What is it for? Triple tree? I didn't authorize that. We paid triple the price, but it was only for a short while. When things were slow, we certainly never charged triple. That's bad business. Where is Has my idiot boy been telling you that? Did he offer you triple for them? He's running my town, isn't he? God damn it, Jimmy. You get him in here. Ada, get my boy on the phone. You tell Jimmy I want to talk to him. You tell him they're still mine. Ada, get Jimmy on the phone. Kimber jumped up and Kyle pushed her behind him as the old man rose to his feet, tall and imposing. We were backing toward the door when an orderly came in with a disapproving look on his face and shooed us out. Long after we'd made it to the lobby, we could still hear Tom Prescott yelling for his son. The ride home was quiet, and I spent it trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle together. The skinned men, the triple tree, the shiny gentleman, the powder. These things seemed to have been pulled blindly from the ether, random and meaningless. The veil over my eyes was thick and heavy, but I was closer to Borrasca than I'd ever been before. I could feel it all around me, but I just couldn't see it. I could almost touch it, but I just couldn't comprehend it yet. I suddenly realized that Kyle was pulling over off the road, and I snapped out of my contemplation. He put the car in park and turned around to look back at me in the back seat. Is this really about Whitney, Sam? Yes. Kimber watched us with worried eyes. Why do you think that? The cops. I mean, your father confirmed that Whitney ran away. I don't believe them, I said through clenched teeth. Look, Sam, we're getting pretty deep in here, and I'm with you every step of the way, but I want to know that there's a reason we're doing this, and pulling Kimber in too. I have to know this is important to you for the right reasons, and not just in obsession. I looked out the window and realized he'd pulled over near the West Rim Prescott Ore Trail. He was right to worry, and even more so to be protective of Kimber. Kai was thinking it, and so was I. The powder. If Borrasca really did involve moving mass amounts of drugs, did I want to involve my friends any further? This wasn't their fight. I loved these people. Could I really risk their safety for my own curiosities and vendettas? But as hard as I wished I could let them go, I knew I needed them. I have to know what really happened to Whitney, I whispered. Kyle turned back around without a word and Kimber placed her hand on mine. I jerked my hand away and crossed my arms and then immediately apologized. Kimber just smiled in a forgiving sort of way. Kyle sighed, Sam. He was interrupted by the piercing ring of Kimber's phone. She scrambled for her cell to silence it, but when she saw the name on the screen, she answered quickly, Dad? What? Wait, what? What do you mean? Dad? No, wait, slow down. Hello? She took the phone away from her ear. Something happened to my mom, and she's at the hospital. Tears filled Kimber's soft green eyes. Kyle threw the car in gear and screeched out of the parking lot. We made the 10-mile trip to the hospital in as many minutes, which is criminally fast on surface streets. Kyle stopped the car at the emergency entrance, and Kimber and I ran inside. A deputy was there waiting. He refused to answer Kimber's desperate questions as he led us to her father. When the deputy swung open the doors, I saw my dad standing next to Kimber's, and I braced myself for the worst. Kimber's dad took her in one direction, and my dad took me in another. Before he said a word, I saw Kimber crumble to the floor on the other side of the room. I looked at my dad helplessly, and he gave me a sympathetic nod and pulled me into a hug. We sat down in a corner, and I stared at my hands as he quietly explained that Mrs. DeStaro had gone grocery shopping at around 1 o'clock, come home, put the groceries away, made 2 lasagnas and a meatloaf, and put them in the freezer. Then she got in the car, drove to the hospital, parked in the shade, took the stairs up 7 floors to the roof, and jumped off it. She lived long enough to apologize to the EMT who found her. I watched Kimber fall apart as her mother's body slowly grew cold in the morgue 1 floor beneath us. Do you think she blames herself? I don't know, man. Probably. I stretched out on the reclined seat of my Chevy and pulled the bill of my hat lower over my eyes. But do you think she's okay? I didn't answer him. I certainly hadn't been okay when Whitney died, and Kimber was even closer to her mom than I was to my sister. She was definitely not okay. Sam, seriously, I'm fucking freaking out here. It's been 2 days. I pushed my hat up off my face and looked over at Kyle, who was admittedly a wreck. His eyes were bloodshot, his face shallow, and his red hair was greasy. Dude, her mom committed suicide. You know how close Kimber was to her mom. She just needs some time and she'll be okay. She hasn't answered any of my texts or calls. I've left her like 9 voicemails, man. I think I'm going crazy. You just have to give her space. Yeah, but she's he still couldn't say it around me. I'm supposed to be looking after her. I sat up and pulled the chair upright behind me. Look, Kyle, I know you want to help Kimber, and I want to help Kimber too, but she hasn't answered our calls, been to school, or come to the door when we've stopped by her house. She doesn't want to see us right now, and we have to be okay with that. Right now, Kimber knows what's best for Kimber. What about the suicide note? You think that has something to do with it? I sighed. We don't even know if there was a note. Kimber's dad was upset and messed up when he said that, and it's possible I misheard him anyway. I asked my dad, and he said there was no letter. Right, because your dad is such a beacon of truth. One look at Kyle told me he'd immediately regretted his words. I shrugged. I don't know what to believe anymore. The truth was that I knew what I heard. Mr. DeStaro had said something to the cops about a letter, but I couldn't tell Kyle that, not right now. He was already worried that his relationship with Kimber was part of the reason her mom had been so depressed. I had asked my dad about the letter when he'd come home after a long night, and he sighed, run both his hands through his hair in a tired way, and said, Sam, I don't know what to tell you. Ann DeStaro didn't leave a suicide note, and this is the first I've heard of it. With our best friend in mourning and our investigation on hold, Kyle and I had been existing in a sort of suspended state. We went to school intermittently, skipped classes here and there, missing end-of-year tests, and smoking more weed than either of us could afford. Without Kimber there to set us straight and keep us in line, we were lethargic, brooding, and irresponsible. I'd never realized how much I relied on her. Kyle and I skipped the last 2 periods of the day and debated on whether or not we should even go to school tomorrow, which was the last day of our sophomore year. We finally decided to show up for second period, which I was glad we did because Kimber showed up in biology. I didn't even see her at first. I had my head down on my desk, resting on folded arms, when I felt a meek hand pat my shoulder. I turned around to see her standing there, looking unsure and uncomfortable. I gave her half a smile and pulled her into a hug, but it wasn't a super comforting, not at all awkward Kimber hug. It was a longer, weaker hug, and I felt so protective in it that I was sad when it was over. How you doing, Kay? I asked her, and she finally released me. Kimber wiped a tear off her cheek. I'm okay, and she gave me a wobbly smile, and I knew it wasn't true. I wrapped her into another quick hug as Phoebe Dranger gave us a snotty look. Have you seen Kyle yet? No, I have next period with him. He's been worried about you. I know, she said, sliding her eyes to the floor. Things have been really hard for me at home. It's okay, I said. We're here for whatever you need. Yeah, that's what I was hoping. Whatever you need.